Hey, how you doing? This is Max Dennison, Digital Inclusion Coordinator for the City of Pittsburgh. Today, my special guest is Kameron Branson, Black Tech Nation affiliate. Cam, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hey, what's up, everybody? My name is Kameron Branson. I'm born and raised in Pittsburgh. Grew up in East Liberty. Graduated from Peabody High School, class of '06. Went to Slippery Rock University. Got my degree in business administration, and since then have been, working with youth around the city of Pittsburgh in a number of capacities, and most recently including tech. So that's kind of how I got into this room today. So I'm grateful for Max inviting me on.
All right. So, we talked about it a little bit, Cam. I know you a little bit from your previous work with All Star Code, also your position right now as my position with Black Tech Nation. You pretty much do the same thing that I do, or you were. So I just kind of today want to pick your brain on, best practices, best strategies, and youth engagement, things that we can do to better, obviously there's a huge, we know tech is the future, and we know the community that we want to service and the students that we want to service. So we want to engage those students. So I just want to kind of pick your brain on strategies and things that you think that we could do in order to get these kids engaged and involved in tech. But before we even get into that, you gave us a little bit about your background. And the question I always ask people when they come on is, what did you expect to be when you were growing up?
Man, when I was growing up, I wanted to be a few things at certain points. All the way up until high school, I probably say I wanted to be a ball player. I wanted to go to NFL. I was, and then once I played like football with bigger kids in high school, I was like, man, this hurts. I don't know if I really want to keep doing this. so I so then I transitioned into like wanting to do well, I guess the reason why I went into business administration for my degree is because I had interest in a bunch of different things, anywhere from event planning to cooking, different fields like that. I was also still extremely interested in sports, so I was thinking, man, a degree in business administration, I can stretch that in a couple of different ways just from what I know about it. But yeah, so growing up, those are kind of like my three realms.
so 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 staying there, growing up, was there any influence? Eventually you transitioned into a space that's tech.
Mhm.
Was there any influence early on to get you involved in tech, or how did you, do you remember anybody saying you should be an engineer or anything like that?
No, I never had that growing up. Never had that exposure.
So knowing that, what would knowing where we're going in the future, and knowing that you never really had that, like me, there were a few, um, there were a few people who may have mentioned it, but not specifically tech that I can never remember for myself specifically. But a lot of the people who went on to be successful that we've had on the show, they either had an uncle or a brother or somebody who was already in engineering or taking some type of degree.
Mhm.
So knowing that that's a problem, knowing that the option to be an engineer or computer scientist or a data scientist wasn't presented to you, how do you think we can change that to where you obviously knew you could be a ball player or you could be something else because it had to have been exposed to you or presented to you. So how do we change that?
I think the biggest thing for me, and I can like while I didn't have that exposure to tech early on,
Hmm.
when I did get into it with getting into All Star Code at the time when I was when I was aware of the of All Star Code hiring for this position of a program lead for Pittsburgh and knowing what the organization was about, I honestly didn't think I was. I just kind of took a shot. I seen their qualifications. I knew I was qualified on paper, but just from an interest standpoint, like I never really had the background in tech. So for me, like going through that process of working with All Star Code and just some and a whole bunch of good people that are over there, um, they made it attainable to me. They made the field of tech something that I felt was attainable.
Mm,
So, and I think growing up, when you look at my interests, it was things that I felt were attainable, like they were tangible to me. I can put my hands on it,
mm-hmm,
and that's why I wanted to be a ball player, because I was good, like I was better than like all my friends. um, so but with tech, especially with young people now, I think the biggest thing is having them know, or or letting them know that it is attainable,
right.
that it's available to them, that it's not this thing that's far out, that it's way out of your grasp. But no, you can learn this, you can do this, and in many ways you're already involved in it just from your everyday life, and you just might not know how, but you can learn how, and then you can capitalize on that if you choose to.
Yeah, good point, Cam. Also, I want you to, while we're here, I want you to speak on, so some kid, let's say I'm a 10-year-old kid,
Mhm.
15-year-old kid, I'm interested in tech, but my parents don't really have the information to get me involved. What would advice be to that student or that scholar that's interested in the tech, but you may not come up in a household that's surrounded by tech? So what I see is a lot of parents don't know about tech. So it makes it difficult. They know about basketball, they know about football, but they
Yeah,
don't know tech. So it makes it difficult for the student. How would you get around that obstacle? Or what advice would you give to a student trying to get around that obstacle?
yeah. I think the biggest piece of advice I would give would be you would have to look into the education, like your education system. I think, and that this kind of also takes me down a different path of, like, a different conversation of the way that I think tech should be in our educational makeup, like it should be in the curriculum.
Mm-hmm,
But while it's not at the extent that it should be,
mm-hmm,
uh, at least not everywhere,
mm-hmm,
uh, there are programs that work with these educational institutions that are desiring to get young people into their rooms so that they can get them into their programs. So, definitely looking into your educational leaders, your teachers, your guidance counselors, um, uh, to see what's available to you, and then in turn with your parents, eventually some of these kids, they might end up like teaching their parents, like making their parents aware of the opportunities that are available for them, through tech education. And then I'm always an advocate of, I mean, just as a person who's worked with youth, who serves kids, I'm a believer that if you serve the kid, you're also serving the family.
mm,
So if I'm working with a 10-year-old kid and he's interested in tech, that kid doesn't have to go to his mom or his parent alone. I can set up these meetings and kind of like be that bridge of what's available, how we can get that student involved in this program, and then also be the same bridge between the educational institution and the parent, and making sure that they know exactly what their kid is getting into.
got you. Got you. Appreciate that. Spinning back to you a little bit more. You have a business administration degree. You're from the city. What makes you jump into tech? I mean, the position, obviously, like you said, on paper, you were built for it. You had the qualifications. What made you? What was your thinking, or what guided you kind of towards applying for a position, even as a lead program management of a tech organization?
Yeah, so probably my biggest thing in working with youth is doing what I can to eliminate barriers,
Mm-hmm.
that prevent them from really pursuing the things that they want to do, or that prevent them from doing the things that are extremely essential, that prevent them from any opportunity. So, like, my role in that, so that's my biggest thing in working with youth, and something that I saw with All Star Code was they were committed to they were committed specifically to young Black males in high school, and wanting to put them through a coding program, and then also connect them with the network that they can continue to work with after they go through this program.
Mm-hmm.
And and it's and to me, that spoke right to my passion of eliminating this barrier, because I know, like me growing up in Pittsburgh, and we see what Pittsburgh is now. Like we see Pittsburgh is it's a tech city. It's a technology driven city, and things are changing rapid every day. Like I was just in Bakery Square the other day, and I seen something I never seen before, and I'm and I'm I just it just happens all the time, and it's never even it's not even a surprise anymore. So, but growing up in that, or growing up in the city of Pittsburgh, I never thought any of that was attainable. None of that was ever like really exposed to me. Like I never thought growing up, growing up in East Liberty, that I could go to CMU,
Mm.
and that's, CMU growing up in East Liberty, that's 5 minutes away. So like,
Right.
going to, going to a Pittsburgh, going to Peabody, a Pittsburgh public school, not being able to think it's attainable for me to go to an institution that's right there, like 10 minutes away from me. So, it just never seemed attainable. And so to see that there was an organization that was committed to breaking down that barrier, I definitely wanted to do my part and and exposing the students to that, the young men that I was working with, and also trying to do something that will make it sustainable, that they can build on through the future, because it wasn't just a summer program. And the coding was a summer program, but there were things after that that will help cultivate the skills that they learned.
Absolutely, absolutely. And myself also, briefly before you came, I was able to participate in All-Star Code, and I can agree to everything that you're saying regarding the program. Being that you were that close, so one of the things I like to do with Tech Talks is make tangible, talk about really tangible things that we can do and work on, but also identify tangible and real things that anybody in tech that's a minority, a woman, Black, Latino may face. So I try to identify things that we could specifically talk about and kind of overcome. So being that you worked in Also Code, which is specifically a program that deals with young African-American males in tech and teaches them how to code, I think a 6-week boot camp. What are some of the obstacles that you've seen that young Black males specifically, or young Black or brown males may face? Because we've had women on the tech conversations, and we've had African-American women on the conversations, and that's like a double entendre. It's like you're a woman and you're African-American woman and you're in the tech industry. But we haven't necessarily had someone who's worked specifically with young African-American males. So what do you think is the biggest barrier or obstacle that gets in the way of them involving themselves or getting involved in tech?
The first thing that comes to mind is just the perception of like young Black men, especially when you're built a certain way. Like you might be tall, you might be kind of muscular. The first thing somebody's gonna say to you is like, "Oh man, what you play? Like, oh, do you play ball? Like, do you hoop? What position you play in football? Like, different things like that." So it's, and when we ask people questions like that, it's, you already putting the perception on them of what you think they are, what you think they could be. And there's nothing wrong with playing sports. Like obviously, like it's a beautiful thing. But to know that if you don't want to play sports, that you're interested in something else, and then but you automatically feel like, oh, because I am like this, I should probably take advantage of it. I should probably take advantage of my physical abilities if I have them. So that's definitely the first thing that comes to mind, is the just the perception that people put on people.
I can throw a couple out too that I know you'll have a good, strong opinion on. So a few obstacles that I've identified is one, environment. So I want you to speak to that. How does if you're a young African-American male, young Latino male, or you're just a young male in Millville, you could be a young white kid that lives in Millville, or an area where there's a lot of activity, negative activity, drug use, things like that. Environment seems to be a big thing. I would say the education system And then I think you spoke to the third one, kind of the perception and the idea of you being 6'8" and being a computer programmer. It just doesn't really necessarily happen. But how do you see young males overcoming environment and in the education system?
Environment, man, that's a big one.
Yeah.
Because I mean, there's definite, like, we see the neighborhoods in Pittsburgh, like we see how like everything is, in many ways, like there's a lot of separation and segregation even in the city of Pittsburgh in regards to where Black people live, white people live, where the thriving communities are, where the poor communities are, and the resources that are available to them. And I think environment, I think definitely leaning heavy on community leaders, and also community leaders working with the education system to try to like help cultivate and put some of these resources into these Black communities. I know also with like even with like the pandemic, one of the biggest things over the last year has been like virtual education, and and whenever it came time that was the only option, there were so many kids and so many families that were hurting because they didn't have computers. And if they had computers, they didn't know how to use them to get on to do school. They knew how to play games maybe, or, surf the web a little bit, but they didn't know how to operate or get onto a Microsoft Teams or a Zoom or anything like that they might have needed to do for school.
Right.
So I definitely think the environment goes hand in hand with the education system. And I kind of started to get at this earlier. This was part of the conversation that I was like, I didn't want to get here yet because that wasn't the exact question that you had asked me. But in the education system, we have to do, and I'm speaking as a person who has worked in the education, like I've worked with teachers and community leaders. We got to do a better job at treating tech and making tech essential to these kids, because it is. Like, obviously, like we can see the immediate impact of that the pandemic has had, and the iniquities that the pandemic didn't even cause. It really just shined a light on iniquities that were already there. A lack of technical resources, a lack of technical education that's available to students. And so it's more than just getting students a computer. It's making them literate, technically literate, and making sure that they can move forward with the way that the world is moving. Because there's a lot of other places and a lot of other schools and educational systems that did not suffer the way that public schools did.
Right.
Because they're getting the technical education that is it's built into the curriculum the same way math is, or the same way a second language is. So we really need to make it like that, instead of it being like, tech does not need to be an elective. Tech needs to be
mandatory.
Yes, it needs to be mandatory.
Right. I'm in full agreement. So and then we're talking about how the students can overcome obstacles. What would you say to, if somebody's working at an organization or university like a CMU, Duquesne, what would be your advice to them if they say, hey, we got the resources and we want to make a connection, we want to get involved with the students, but we don't know how to, or we don't know, what's the best practice for that? If you could have an open conversation with them, what would you say?
Honestly, I mean that's what I'm here for. Like, I can be that bridge, because I'm not really a techie by trade, but in the realm of like wanting to break down barriers and get kids into these rooms where these conversations, where this education is happening, that's what I'm here for. That's what you're here for. There's people who work with students in their organizations, and a large part of their job inherently is to be an advocate for them. to be an advocate for them, to try to put them in situations where they can succeed. And those are and those are the kinds of people who these institutions who may not have a the necessary backgrounds working with youth or wanting to even attract youth, go to those community leaders who are working specifically with the students so that they can be the bridges between you and the student.
Yeah. Okay. Good answer. Let me ask you this, Cam. You brought up a little bit about football earlier. And to me, there's always this competitive thing between tech and athletics. It's like they can't work together. And I always tell people, I'm not against athletics. I'm not against football. But I feel like, we know that less than 1% of people who try out for the NFL are going to make it to the NFL.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the same numbers for the NBA, right? We've had this conversation before. But you can't tell young kids that. They all still believe that they're going to be the next Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant, or they think they're going to be the next Emmitt Smith. How do we make it popular to be in tech? How do we make tech compete with athletics in the realm of youth?
Yeah. So to me, it kind of runs deeper than being popular. And I think it goes back to what I was saying before about like tech being essential, like tech being in the educational makeup that these students are, they're going K through 12, like putting the technical education into their curriculum. Because I think because I actually think like even when we look at sports, when we look at kids who want to go to the NBA, kids who want to go to the NFL, a lot of that it looks, one it's kind of like twofold. They see people that look like them,
right?
And even a lot of times people who go to the same schools as them. Like I remember one time I was working with a student, and he was from Clariton, and he was like, man, I'm gonna go to the NFL. I'm gonna be like Tyler Boyd. And but I'm like, man, like it's hard to do that. It's hard to do that. Like I understand, like he went to his school. He lived in his neighborhood. So like, why wouldn't you think you can do something that somebody who looks like you and comes from where you come from can go on and do something like that?
Right.
So, but I think like a lot of times when we look at sports, because to me, like sports it's a glamour job. Like we look at the sport, we look at especially pro. We see them out there doing what we do at gym and getting paid for it. And it's like, man, they get paid for that. They get endorsements. They're rich. They get money. Like it's a glamour thing. And I think for me, I don't even want to try to equate tech to sports because I don't want to glamorize tech. Because I think when you glamorize it, or when you compare it to sports, inherently you might end up glamorizing it. And then in turn, if you don't see anybody that looks like you doing it, it might be unattainable. Like, I'm sure there's a different path to get to the National Hockey League, to the NHL than there is to get to the NBA. But if there was, if I'm working with, just keeping it real, there's not a lot of black players in the NHL.
Right.
It's not predominantly black the same way that the NBA is or the NFL is. So, why would a kid feel like, oh, hockey's attainable for me, but nobody looks like you? Nobody comes from where you come from and goes to the NHL. But you can look at football players who come from Pittsburgh. You can look at LeVar Arrington, Tyler Boyd, Darrelle Revis, and it's just like their families. It's like,
right.
Oh man, I can do that.
Right. So kind of just more exposure, because it's probably more probable that the family of an engineer than NFL athlete or an NBA athlete here in the city. But I think you touched on a big point about not glamorizing tech, because I think, the sale is always, do you want to be the next Bill Gates, or you want to be the next Mark Zuckerberg, or do you want to be the next, Zach Dorsey? That's kind of like a sale for tech, but the reality of it is, even that's very tough. It's very tough to be a Facebook, the CEO of any of those huge companies, Microsoft, and more than likely, I try not to sell the dream, but I do say, or I do agree with the fact that if you join tech and you become really good at tech, that it's a quick trajectory to sustainable living.
Yeah.
You'll live a good life in the context of what we consider a good life. You'll make decent money. You'll be able to purchase a home, be safe in a decent community. And we know that the salaries are only going to go up in the tech space. So I agree with you with the glamorization of it versus the reality of it, because a lot of kids, they come in and think they're going to build a video game, and they actually see that even to build a video game takes a lot of code and a lot of work. So I agree with that. If you were to talk to a student today and they wanted to get into tech, what advice would you give them? What classes do you think they should be into? What do you think will help make a great tech student who will go on and have a good tech career?
Yeah, definitely. I would, like, if they're just starting out, the first thing that I would tell them to do is that if you have access to a computer and internet, start looking stuff up. Start looking up stuff, about, like, how to code, what these different fields, what different positions do, what different fields do, kind of like try to gauge that interest, because tech is it's a big space, and it's not just like, one particular thing. There's definitely many roles that a lot of people can play in it. So, like, definitely try to, like, gauge, like, and focus your interest, look at some different things that may appeal more to you, but then also, like I said, like we said, like, there's programs out there who are looking to get kids into these rooms. Beta builders is first one that comes to my head, and I would definitely refer a student to beta builders. A coding boot camp for teens, like, I know, like, that's what we had with All Star Code. Really, was that summer coding boot camp, that concentrated time, pretty much like 40 hours a week for the student to come in, learn the skills, build the projects, and then continue to also, like, build on their own. So those programs exist. And then the other thing I would do is to try to, I would definitely tell them to help, and I would help them with this as well, like, help leverage, the different connections that they're making through beta builders, through their education system, through their coding boot camp. If they do that, to try to get a mentor and try to help build that network in tech.
Okay. Part of the conversation is always, I like to ask, being that you've been in tech for a few years now, another glamorization, I like that word of tech, is that it's going to be all peaches and cream once you join. And we know that that's not the case. And we've seen a number of different incidents from the conversation that we had here on Tech Talk, Rec2Tech Talk as well. What would be, first, give me, if you have an example of a situation specifically where, you were given a hard time, or your worst experience in tech, and it may have had something to do with either your gender, your ethnicity. Also, when students come up against these things, like, so I literally just got an inbox from a young lady who just finished her computer engineering career degree, and she was like, "Hey, I just want to talk to you about, how do you overcome if people, imposter syndrome and things like that." So I encourage her to watch these conversations. But what would your advice be? And what is your worst experience in tech in general?
Oh man, you remember Code Day?
It definitely crossed my mind.
That was probably the worst experience that I had in tech. So to help, give everybody some context, there was this, uh, uh, what is it called? It's like it's not
Hackathon,
a
right?
boot camp. It's like a week. It was like a week. Yeah, it's a hackathon.
Yeah, yeah.
So there was this hackathon happening over the weekend, and I'm with All Star Code, and I referred, like we heard about it, and I wanted to get some of my students in it, so that's what we did. Like I got some students signed up, we got them in it. We just Max did the same thing, so he has some students in there as well. Um, so I showed up to the event. I showed up to the event because I'm texting my guys. I'm saying, hey, like, how's everything going? Are y'all good? I think it was a 24-hour thing. They were kind of like locked in.
Mm-hmm.
Food was provided, but my guys didn't like the food, so I told them, I was like, hey, I'll bring y'all something to eat, so that y'all can, so that y'all can not be hungry and do what y'all need to do. But so I showed up, brought them some food. I hung out for a minute. Uh, got to talk to my good brother Max, and we chopped it up for a little bit, and that was kind of it. Like, so one of the things that did happen was, that they said something to me about bringing the food in. I got approached by the guy who was running the hackathon. He said something to me about bringing the food in. He said that they don't really allow outside food, and I said, okay, I'm sorry about that. Um, they can like eat it away from everybody else. I didn't know that. I'm sorry. He made my guys go outside and eat their food outside. And I was, at the time, I was like, okay, that's not right. But I was just like, just kind of like, no blood, no foul. Like, you do this, you come back in, like, it don't got to be no trouble or anything. Um, about a week later, or maybe not even a week, a few days later, I get an email from my supervisor that got emailed to her saying, like, what happened at Code Day? I was nothing. Ain't nothing happened. It was just like, in the email, it was all these details about how, I was accused of like being in there and like causing all this chaos, and like disrespecting the leaders, at Code Day. Uh, that I was distracting the kids, and it was just stuff that I didn't do, and
Mm-hmm.
stuff that didn't happen when I was there.
Right,
And
right. And I can
and I was and like
attest to
I was extremely confused. Yeah. So once, I talked to my supervisor. I said, none of this. I was like, none of this stuff happened. We actually ended up having a conference call with the person who was over the whole, organization, and they were saying, well, you did bring the food in. I was like, but none of the. I was like, what would implore you to say all of this other stuff? Like, just like bold-faced lie about about all
right.
these other things. And honestly, and I think I understand how it is to work with youth, and to want a structure to be in place so that you're ensuring the safety and the quality of the program for the students. I understand all of that. As a Black man in that space, and I think this kind of goes for most things, actually. I don't have a reason to believe that didn't happen because I was Black or my kids weren't Black. Like, because it didn't happen to anybody else. Nobody else got caught out, and there were only a couple groups of Black students there. It was our groups. so so
True.
it's like,
True.
that didn't happen to anybody else. So I honestly have no reason to believe that you didn't make my kids go outside and eat their food, like they snuck into your program, or like you needed to kick them out, like they were doing some like disrespectful, distracting stuff for everybody else, except for they were Black, because none of that stuff was happening.
Right.
Nobody else got kicked out. Nobody
Right.
else got approached. And it's like, and I think like a lot of that is made up, is made is it like a lot of that makeup is in society too. Like, society doesn't, if I get called out for something, I almost don't have any reason to believe that it happened for any other reason than me being Black, because of the way that we've already seen the world work.
Yeah.
So, so to definitely like be in those spaces, like that was definitely bad. a bad experience. Something that I would never want my kids to go through again. Because my biggest thing was like, making them go outside. Like, that was like there's some animals or something. That's disrespectful. So that was probably my worst experience. But to add to that real fast, with my background and working with students in a number of different capacities, including ministry, education, uh, workforce development, this one of the saddest things to me is that people of color that I do work with, Black people that I work with, the experiences, regardless of the field, look alike. They're all similar. So like whether you working in tech, working in ministry, like I've experienced racism in ministry, I've experienced racism in tech, I've experienced racism in education. That's the saddest part to me is that this whole that this disrespectful that this disrespect really like transcends all these different fields, and the experiences are very similar. That's the saddest part.
Good point. And I appreciate you being honest and upfront about that situation. I was actually, just to speak to what Cam's talking about, we were both there representing our individual programs, and what he's saying is true. It was a mess, and we ended up pulling out. I think Cam pulled out first, and then we ended up pulling out our students as well. It was a mess. I'll say that to say the least. I think the most disturbing thing for me in that process was the email that was sent, because I definitely handled the situation very smoothly, very calmly. So to find out that that was the how it was handled was very disturbing, I'll say. Before we close out, before we end the conversation, everybody's not going to be a programmer. Everybody's not going to be in tech. Some people may want to be a liaison. Some may want to be a mentor or somebody who introduces someone in the tech. Cam, they might want the same position that you have. What would you say makes you good at what you do? Or if you could build the next Kameron Branson to take over, or to you had a company specifically involved in doing what you do, what skill sets do you think makes somebody in your position good?
So for me personally, I think what makes me good at what I do, and I say this humbly, is that I'm not I my commitment isn't really just to one aspect of youth service. It's more so the whole list. I really do have like a holistic approach of working with kids and really just wanted to help them do what they need to do, and two, what they want to do. And really put them on the best paths, connect them with the best people to do that. And I think, just like knowing in myself, like I can't help a kid do everything, but I can help them get with somebody who can help them do that. So, definitely, being a resource and an advocate, and also an outlet for students, man, because students go through a lot. They go through a lot, and most of the time they need somebody to talk to. And a lot of times there's not always a good person to talk to for them. So definitely being like a positive influence in someone's life. And to answer your question about building the next Kameron Branson, part of my goal, honestly, I don't want to build the next. I want to build somebody better. Like I want. Like there's a lot of things there's a lot of barriers that prevented me from doing things that I wanted to do, or that prevented me from different opportunities as a child that I didn't even realize until I got older. So I'm like, I don't want students to have to go through that. I want to break down these barriers so that they can see different things that they can be, things that they can do, and in circles that they can be in. So, I definitely, like, I think about my son. He's 10 months old. I'm like, man, you gonna be like, he inspires me. He makes me want to be the kind of person now that I would want him to be when he gets older. But I also know that I'm not there yet, and I also know that I want him to be better than me. I want him to be more skilled at so many different things, and more, more just assertive and more intelligent and make smarter decisions and make all those different things that I did. And that's my commitment, to make sure that students don't have to go through different things that I went through, and that we can, and then I can get them in a place where they can do the same. Because that's what should happen with progress. When there's or that's what should happen with change. When there's change, there should be progress. If something changes and there's not, and it doesn't get better, then you did something wrong.
I like that. I like that. If something changes and it didn't get better, you did something wrong. Closing out, Cam, if I'm a kid, I'm a high school student, I want to reach out to you. I like the conversation. I'm like, hey, I think this guy can help me get to the next space I need to be in tech. How can they reach out to you? How can they get in contact with you?
Yeah, so yeah, definitely. I'm open. I'm available. My I'll give out my email. My email is it good for me to say it, or should we?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah, we'll post it in the link too.
Okay. Yeah, my email is Kameron B 04 @gmail.com. And we'll if you need the spelling for that, we'll post it in the link as well. Uh, I definitely like email me. I'm connected with a lot of different good people, and even if it's not necessarily in the tech circle, like let me know how we can figure out something for you. And because I know a lot of different people, a lot of different resources, there's a lot of good people doing stuff around the city of Pittsburgh, and I'm just trying to do my best to be a bridge between people who need it and people who can provide the need.
Gotcha. Hey Cam, I want to thank you again, man, for coming up to have a conversation. Again, this is Kameron Branson, formerly of All Star Code, Black Technician affiliate and influencer. He's done a lot of incredible work around the city with young youth trying to get involved in tech. Yeah, and again, man, thanks for coming and having an honest conversation. I appreciate it. And thanks everybody for tuning in for another Rec2Tech Talk. If you guys have any questions or concerns or want to reach out to Cam, you can reach out to me directly. Or you can reach out through the Citiparks YouTube channel. Please rewatch the video, get the lessons, some of the information that Cam gave to us today. And thank you, man. Appreciate you.
Appreciate you too, bro. Thanks, everybody.
All right, have a good day. Thanks.